Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and today I have a lot to talk about thanks to it being playoff season and the playoffs. There is a lot to discuss as far as, of course, Russell Westbrook and his Oklahoma City Thunder. They now have a problem in Houston, and we got to talk about it because if you've been listening to the show, you guys know I'm really, really disappointed right now. I'm just let down, and I know Russell probably feels very similarly. Similarly. I guess that's a big word for me this morning. But you know, it's a lot going on. He had another historic night last night. I'm going to tell you guys why, but it just was not enough to get it done. So there were quite a few games played these last few days. I'm going to give you guys a recap starting from actually Monday night, because the last episode recorded for the podcast on the GSMC basketball podcast was Monday morning. So Tuesday, I was not in, and then yesterday, Wednesday morning, Ben was not able to come in. So we have a lot to catch up on as far as a recap and a preview into what's to come as far as the games tonight. So we're going to rewind to Monday night. That was April 17th. So that was the Indiana Pacers taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers, of course, in Cleveland. Not a bad game for the Pacers, but the Cavs were able to get that second win as far as on Monday, 111 to 117. Paul George, 32 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists. He's doing his diligent best in the inside for his squad. Kevin Love, able to produce a whole lot for the Cavaliers. He had 27 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists in that game on Monday. And then the Grizzlies went to go take on the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio, a win for them. It was 96 to 82 with Kawhi Leonard. No surprise there, being the top performer for the Spurs. He had 37 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists. So that was Monday's games. Then we're going to jump on over to Tuesday. The Milwaukee Bucks took on the Raptors. The Raptors defeated them, 106 to 100. Giannis of the Bucks, he had 24 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. I also have a really good friend named Giannis from college, and I was just talking to him earlier this weekend, and every time we speak about Giannis on the Bucks, it makes me think of my dear friend. Anyway, so for the Raptors, the top performer was Kyle Lowry. He had 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 5 assists for his squad in that win against the Bucks on Tuesday. Then the Chicago Bulls took on the Celtics, and, you know, unsurprisingly to me, or to people who really truly believe in experience sometimes outdoes new talent, is the Chicago Bulls defeated the Celtics 111 to 97. Jimmy Butler, I think the Bulls have a really good combination of that young talent and experienced talent that is just enough to, that young talent to keep them quick and fresh, but that veteran talent and veteran experience to help them, that the veterans just know what to say when it's need to be said. They know how to act. They don't buckle under pressure because they know what it takes to get out of sticky situations just because they've been there before. They know how to lose. They know how to win. So that's kind of why I usually go in favor of the more experienced squad. So anyway, so Jimmy Butler for the Chicago Bulls on Tuesday, he had 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists. Marcus Smart of the Celtics, 13 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 assists. And then for the last game of Tuesday evening, we had the Utah Jazz visiting the Clippers, playing the game in LA. And the Clippers won that game at home 99-91. Chris Paul was the big guy, in that game for the Clippers. He had 21 points, 2 rebounds, and 10 assists. So that was Tuesday night. Now we're going to last night. We're getting all caught up for last night. And last night, the Atlanta Hawks played the Washington Wizards. And the Wizards are leading right now, 2-0. The score last night for that game was 101-109. Paul Millsap of the Hawks, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, but just not enough. With John Wall, he posted 32 points, 5 rebounds, and 9 assists for his team last night. And then moving on to Oklahoma City Thunder and the Rockets. We're going to dive a little bit more into this game a little bit later, probably after the break. Houston is leading now 2-0. The Thunder lost 111-115. And, a huge game for the top two, basically, MVP candidates. James Harden, he had 35 points, 4 rebounds, and 8 assists. And like I said, Houston is now currently leading 2-0. And then last night, quite a tough loss for the Trailblazers. I mean, I guess you could say it's expected, but, you don't expect it to be this bad. The Trailblazers lost to the Warriors last night, 81-110. Maurice Harkless of the Trailblazers, he had 15 points, 8 rebounds, and 1 assist. My guy, Steph Curry, 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists for the point guard up top for the Warriors. So, sometimes you lose some, you win some, can't win them all, but, tough loss for the Blazers. So they are definitely going to have to take a look at some film and give the Warriors some, something to try for, I guess. I don't know. But, and then again, it happens, it happens. So anyway, then moving on, so that was last night's game. So then today we have some games going on as well. We have the Cavaliers in Indiana taking on the Pacers tonight. That's going to be game 3. The Cavs are currently in the lead 2-0. That's going to be 4 p.m. Pacific time on TNT. Then we have the Raptors taking on the Bucks in Milwaukee. And that series is actually tied 1-1. That's going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And then to wrap up the evening is going to be the Spurs and the Grizzlies. The Spurs are in the lead with that series 2-0. So some surprises, some series are not really that big of a surprise. I think I've been hearing a lot of people discuss really being surprised with the Boston Celtics and Chicago Bulls series right now. I'm not saying that the Bulls are going to sweep the Celtics by no means at all, but I'm just saying right now, I think what we are experiencing and what we're witnessing is that experience factor shifting into gear. So hopefully, we'll see what the Celtics bring out as the series continues on. So anyways, with that, we're going to take it to a quick break. And when I come back, we have a lot more basketball to discuss. So keep it locked here. You're listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. I'll be right back.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. So there's a lot of basketball action, of course, still going on. There's been some drama in the world of basketball as far as the Knicks are concerned. There's, just a lot to consider as it's playoff season, but then also some teams are already focusing on the draft and getting ready for the draft. There's some minor changes happening in the D League as well. And so there's just really a lot going on. So, it's just one of those things. So, of course, we have to get into some of the other news around the world of basketball. So, first thing I wanted to discuss was the historic night for Russell, but it was pretty overshadowed because now, like I said, they are 0-2 in the series against the Houston Rockets, and I feel like there's just a lot of pressure on the top players in this game, James Harden and Russell, as far as this series is concerned, because this is kind of I don't know about you guys, but this is definitely what I wanted, because I like to see them, the two top candidates that we've been discussing all season long really face off against one another, because I think that this is something that, kind of shows who's the top dog. I don't know. That's just how I'm kind of chopping this one up. And then I guess, and so, because we've been arguing, and I've been one of those people arguing that it's kind of not fair just to look at the wins that a team has for that MVP, that candidate to win. I think that there's a lot more that goes into it as far as this season is concerned. I'm not for the whole co-MVP at all. So I was really looking forward to this series to kind of see one of these two guys really break out. Now, Russell, I'm not going to lie, he is breaking out. He's having, like last night, he had another phenomenal game and was able to make history again as he scored the most points ever in a playoff triple-double against the Rockets. He had 51 points, 13 assists, and 10 rebounds. So definitely a huge game for Russell. And, you would think with a performance like that from just one player that you'd be able to secure that W. But they did lose by 4 last night to the Rockets. And, after reading a lot of reports and doing some research on, Russell, and we all know how difficult it is for him to lose, he basically was really upset about it. He didn't care about, and he said it himself. He said he didn't care about those stats, that line. He said he was concerned about the fact that they lost. So Rockets, they did go on a 12-3 run to close off the third quarter. And so instead of Westbrook's usual fashion of sitting out the last part of the third quarter and a couple of minutes to start the fourth, he actually started the fourth quarter and played the entire period and was only 4 for 18 from the field. So, a tough game for him, whether or not it's because he needed that extra rest or if it was just because, frustration and trying to, in this particular case, do the most. And you guys know I'm all for Russell doing the most and going crazy and everything. But in this particular case, 4 and 18 seems a little frantic to me. Steve Adams, he did say that it was garbage and that they he went to go on to say that they weren't making the greatest of shots and that it was a combination of a lot of things: focus, doing it at both ends, mental stamina. So, and I want Russell to win MVP, but in a game like this, he's producing numbers like the most valuable player should and would, especially if you're Russell. 51 points, 13 assists, and 10 rebounds. You really cannot ask more of Russell. Truly, what else can you ask? What more does he need to do? Should he have had 55 or 56 points to force it into overtime or win by one? I don't know. So I'm really hurt right now for you, Russell. I hope that we're able to kick it into gear and get it back together, so then that way you could still, because now it's kind of like the new argument is, well, now you have the two MVP candidates matching up against one another. Their teams are matching up right now, and the only one who's being consistent, because James had, I believe, 35 points last night, so he's consistently being a top scorer, a top performer for his teams. Harden is, and his team is able to still secure that win. So yeah, he's not getting 50 plus points, but he's getting enough of himself. He's giving enough of himself and getting enough from the rest of his squad to secure these wins and to continue deep into the playoffs if this is the way that the series continues to go. So now I get that argument, and I'm not going to even downplay that argument, because this is what we're witnessing. This is what we're watching, and it's just tough because I feel like he still kind of deserves it. I just really wish that they didn't have to face off against one another, because I wanted it, but now that it's happening, I wish it wasn't happening, because it's making Oklahoma City seem even worse. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, moving on to another, some more news in the NBA. So definitely going to be, there's some games playing today as well. So there's quite a few things still to talk about as far as these past games. Kristaps Porzingis and how he feels about New York as well after missing those exit meetings, and why he skipped out on that is definitely something that we're going to cover later on in the show as well, because that I was just, something that we're following as well. And so the Grizzlies also are going to be paying the fine for their point guard, Mike Conley. So together him and so Mike Conley as well as his teammates are going to pay the $30,000 fine that their Coach David Fizdale, received for criticizing the officiating after their loss to the San Antonio Spurs. So he said that they told him right away, you're not going to have to pay that, and that, they lost to the Spurs in that game 2, 96-82. That was on Monday night when he got this. And so, it happens, and they were saying that basically one thing that their coach did say is that the series can be over and you're always going to fight for your guys. So that's just something. And I mean, in this particular case, I'm kind of glad that the Grizzlies are doing this. This shows that they're all on the same page. They all stand behind their coach. And, he ultimately got the fine going to bat for them in that loss, criticizing the officiating. So, they're all in this together and definitely making, it comes with the territory and things like that. So the squad says they got his back. They're going to pay that $30,000 fine for him. And I mean, when everybody's pitching in, it's not too much, right? So anyways, with that, I'm going to cut it to the last break of the episode. And when I come back, we're going to talk about Kristaps. Of course, a lot to talk about with him. Moving on to the Cleveland Cavaliers and J.R. Smith as well. So keep it locked here. You are listening to the Golden State Media Concepts basketball podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and what else is there? We still have, the Knicks. I don't know. There's just a lot going on with the Knicks. The Celtics, Marcus Smart, he was fine. I'm going to tell you guys why. $25,000 for him with that as well. So just a lot of fines going on as we speak right now that got to be paid. Somebody's got to get their money in some kind of way. So anyways, I will be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Pauline, and we are getting ready to wrap up this episode of the podcast, and there has been a lot going on. I'm excited to see about the rest of the playoffs and see what's going to happen. I just recorded also this morning the sports podcast, where this morning I was hosting with my co-host Anthony, and we dug into how we feel about how we think the rest of these current series are going to go. So definitely take a listen to the sports podcast, where we discuss everything in the world of sports, including, of course, basketball. So there's been a lot going on. I personally, like I said earlier in the show, would not be surprised. I think people are a tad bit shocked, but it's not a surprise how well the Bulls are doing against the Celtics. Perhaps, I'm hoping that the Celtics get at least one win, but I would not be 1,000% surprised if they got swept. And then going on into the rest of the playoffs, I think that, I don't know, I think the Trailblazers are going to get swept. That's just how it's going to be. The Pacers, not swept, but how there's some teams where you're like, you're not going to be surprised if they're swept. It will be a reverse sweep for the Celtics, and if that were to happen, they would face off against the winner of the series with Washington. And I really feel like if the Bulls and Washington were to face off together, that would be quite a series to look forward to too. So, I'm not mad at anything. Hopefully we will see some great basketball these next couple of nights. I'm very excited. I hope, and I've said it before, and I probably should stop saying it because you guys know I am the bearer of bad news, but I'm really hoping that it's going to be the Spurs in the finals. I don't really mind as far as the East side, but I'm really hoping for the Spurs because I love the Spurs, and then, that'll be kind of like a nice little icing on the cake for the Spurs. But anyway, speaking of the playoffs, so tonight, the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to face off against Indianapolis. So they are going to face off in Indianapolis, against Indiana. They are currently 2-0, looking to force it to 3-0 over the Pacers. And I think the Pacers might get one win, though. Just one win at home. I think at least just one. But anyway, so J.R. Smith is, as of yesterday, he did say that he did not like sitting out, and that he feels like he sat enough. He has a sore left hamstring right now, and he spent the entire second half of game 2 on the bench, and he doesn't like it. He wants to be in the game, rightfully so, but this is a very, very sticky situation, because if they do continue to go deep into the playoffs, do we want this to be a reoccurring thing each series or do we nurse J.R. Smith now when, we're basically about to get ready to sweep the Pacers within another game or two, next 2 games, whatever. So do they sit him or what? And he did say, during game 2, when asked about his leg in game 2, he did say he would absolutely be ready for game 3. But as far as the organization is concerned, they are going to really wait until literally like game time before clearing him. And he did have a MRI and it came back fine. So hopefully it will go in his favor as far as that's concerned. But again, like I said, you just kind of want to be careful because we don't want injuries to haunt us later on. Like, if you're in a championship series, you don't want something that could have been prevented to pop up all of a sudden. And then speaking of things from the past popping up to haunt you, this is not really the past, but the Celtics guard Marcus Smart, he had a great game the other day. They did lose on Tuesday in game 2 to the Chicago Bulls again, but he was actually fined $25,000 for making a really rude gesture to a fan. The Celtics coach Brad Stevens did say that it was unacceptable what he did when he missed a three-pointer basically during the fourth quarter, and when he was hustling back on defense, he kind of, did something a little tad bit rude. And so he's going to be fined for that. He did end up with 13 points after playing 27 rebounds, but, that was that. Basically, they did see, I don't know. Coach Stevens did say that he saw a brief video clip of the gesture, and he said, quote, "For my clip, from the angle that I saw, I couldn't tell, but obviously if he made a gesture, it's unacceptable, and that will be handled by the league." So, he's not throwing him completely under the bus, but it's kind of like, all right, let's get this over with type of a thing. Let's not do that again. I don't know. I just think that's rude, and you shouldn't let fans, of course, get into your head ever, especially to just, tell them off like that. I don't know. It's just not. I just don't think that that's cool. Anyway, so before we get ready to wrap up this episode of the show, so we've been discussing a lot about the New York Knicks, even now in this postseason, now that they are, not postseason for them, it's the off season. So he did skip the exit meetings that they were supposed to be having with management and things like that, saying that he was frustrated with the franchise. And then he did say in an interview with the New York Post that and I quote, he said, "Of course, I love New York. I love New York," he said. And, because people were kind of like, wait a second, does he not want to come back and things like that? He did decline to comment about skipping the exit meetings. And he said, and I thought this was pretty classy of what he, when asked to comment on the reason why he skipped the exit meetings, he said, "It's not the right moment to comment on anything. I don't want to say anything." So, that I think that's really good, not stirring up the pot anymore, but standing by what his actions were at the beginning of the week. So, and right now I'm sure for all Knicks players, especially guys like him who are giving their all and are some of the top players on that squad, it's frustrating at this time, and he just felt like he didn't have anything to say, I guess, at that exit meeting. So that's probably why he didn't go. He, for whatever his reasoning, I don't know. I feel like he's not going to ever tell us really why. We might hear reports from sources that tell us why he didn't go, but I don't think he's going to straight out come out and say it just because, with a comment like that, like right now is not the time to say anything. He knows that right now he doesn't want to say anything that could, one, I think, jeopardize the organization or jeopardize his position with the organization, but just to not shine any more negative light on an already really crazy situation that's happening right now in New York. So I thought that his response was quite classy, and I thought that was a breath of fresh air in this continued saga of the New York Knicks situation, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, so that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Ben will be back tomorrow morning to give you guys a recap of tonight and dive us into the weekend. So I will talk to you guys on Monday, and he will be here tomorrow. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.